A shocking new lawsuit has been filed against WWE, Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, and TKO Group Holdings to do with the Ringboy Scandal, which rocked the WWF in the 1990s. It has come back around as several different plaintiffs have come forward and filed a lawsuit through lawyers with the company and these individuals involved. We are going to take a look at a video that was presented by the legal team of the plaintiffs. We are going to take a look at the statement, the official statement of the plaintiffs as well. And we are also going to hear from Janelle Grant's lawyer, who obviously involved in a very separate incident and lawsuit. However, her comments are also kind of important to contextualize what this means, as it seems like many of the allegations against both WWE, Vince McMahon, and others are indeed coming to light. And we are going to take a look at all that. Be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right. So before we get to the video, which does a pretty good job of setting the stage, some of you may be wondering what exactly the Ringboy Scandal was. Well, to sum it up in a very brief way, back in the 80s, 90s, the tradition and before then as well, the tradition for wrestling was you would go from town to town. Obviously, gate was more important. The attendance was more important. And you would be going from town to town. So in order to set up the ring, do different things around in preparation for the show, they would actually require the help of what they would call ring boys, which were local, many times teenagers and like boys or men, to help set up the ring, do different things around production and whatnot. And what ended up happening was there were allegations made against individuals, WWE officials like Mel Phillips, Pat Patterson, and Terry Garvin at the time, all of whom were very prominent in Vince's inner circle, and all of whom were at one point kind of not let go from the company, but in the case of Mel Phillips as well as Terry Garvin, they were actually distanced from the company, but then brought back in at later points. But these allegations have been out there. They were noted in the Vince McMahon Netflix docuseries, and they have come back to light, it would seem. First, let's take a look now at the video that the legal team of the John Does who are alleging who are the plaintiffs, in this lawsuit have to say. Let's take a look at this video.
The Ringboy Scandal was one of the darkest stories you can find in pro wrestling's history.
It's part of a long-standing culture in wrestling of abuse and neglect. Local underage boys were brought to help set up the ring and do odd jobs.
One of the people who were coordinating to bring in these ring boys was a ring announcer named Mel Phillips.
The ring announcer approached me after the show. He said they were going to Philadelphia. Would I like to go?
He'd stand outside the car while all the little kids were playing and show them the belts. Like, he always pulled out the belts.
I was 13 years old when I met Mel Phillips. Actually, I did say, I recognize you. You're Mel Phillips, the ring announcer. He said he wanted me to do him a favor, and I followed him into the dressing room. Once that door was closed, he just assaulted me, threw me down on the ground, got on top of me.
He asked me, "You want to go inside?" And you could see all the wrestlers, and, I was through. He asked me to take my clothes off. You could tell I'm shaking right now thinking about it.
It started out just your toes. Then he'd basically make you cry almost and submit. But once you're flat on the floor or on the bed, you're stuck.
There was a very material harm that was happening, sexually assaulting the underage boys.
Famously, Tom Cole was one of the victims who had been abused by Mel Phillips and later was propositioned by Terry Garvin, who was vice president with the company as well.
This was a group of men that were executives. Terry Garvin, that was the underboss to Pat Patterson, who was the vice president. And Pat Patterson was the boss. He was the guy back there.
A horrific abuse of power. People being put in place and holding positions for years and decades in some cases because they were some of Vince's boys and Vince taking care of his boys.
Mel would get the boys when they were 13 and he would groom them. And some of them he groomed to bring up the line to Terry. It was like a baton they were passing.
And this was a major scandal in the early 90s.
I was grabbed on numerous occasions in my testicles and my buttocks by Pat Patterson of the World Wrestling Federation, and Terry Garvin propositioned me when I was 16, offered me cocaine and all kinds of drugs to have sex with him.
Linda McMahon was, part and parcel with Vince McMahon in terms of the goings on in the company and, absolutely was very connected with Tom Cole.
My brother said, no, Vince, all I want to do, he goes, I just wanted to work for you guys. And you guys chased me away. When I was 16, Terry Garvin did this to me. So Vince said, okay, I won't hire them back. He let all three of them go at that time, Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, and Pat Patterson. So they were out of the company.
Mel Phillips was temporarily let go by the company and then brought back with the warning to stay away from the Ring Boys.
It's just unbelievable that they would keep someone like that around. A child molester.
When the scandal came out with the kids, they got evidence. They got a tape. They wrote a couple reports. They called him a predator in the report. They called him a pedophile in the report. You had kids out there that were waiting for the feds to come to them to ask them questions. The feds never showed up.
Vince McMahon, one of the biggest names in the entertainment industry, has once again stepped down after accusations of rape, assault, and human trafficking.
Let's not forget this wasn't just Vince McMahon. This was a mass conspiracy of many people destroying many lives within an organization.
Mel injured me. He hurt me, caused me a lot of rage, suicidal thoughts.
It's embarrassing to say that you've been molested.
He destroyed me. I'm shaking right now thinking about it. I don't trust no one in this world.
My brother-in-law called me and told me that Tom hung himself. To this day, I hear Tom's voice. Please let them know what they did to me.
To this day, I try to figure out what did we do to fall into that trap.
But you can't hide forever. The truth always comes out. They should have looked out for the kids and they didn't.
That was the very hard to watch, quite frankly, video that the legal team over at DiCello and Levitt produced and put together. They also, I should note, put out a statement that I can read out right now. Here it is. This is the first part. Baltimore, October 23rd, 2024. DiCello, Levitt, and Murphy, Falcon and Murphy, filed a major lawsuit today against World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, and Linda McMahon, and TKO Group Holdings on behalf of 5 survivors of sexual abuse. The survivors, John Does 1 through 5, were known within WWE as ring boys, underage boys hired by the organization's ringside announcer and ring crew chief, Mel Phillips, to assist with errands and other tasks in preparation for WWE wrestling show. The underage ring boys were groomed, exploited, and sexually abused by Phillips, who targeted children from broken homes. His sexual assaults occurred not only at wrestling venues, but also in hotel rooms and other locations where Phillips would shuttle the boys in plain sight. Defendants were fully aware of the systematic and pervasive abuse and did nothing to prevent it or stop it. The FBI previously identified at least 10 ring boys abused by Phillips, but there are likely countless others who have suffered in silence for decades. Quote, thanks to the bravery of our clients, we finally have a chance to hold accountable those who allowed and enabled the open, rampant sexual abuse of these young boys, said Greg Gutzler, a partner at DiCello Levitt, who is leading the litigation. Quote, that so many were aware of the sexual abuse of the Ring Boys and did nothing to prevent or stop it is simply unconscionable. The press release goes on to read, quote, the survivors only recently learned of the depth and knowledge of that the McMahons and WWE had about what happened to them, and that sexual abuse in the company started at the top with the McMahons. The filing of Grant v. WWE et al., the acquisition of WWE by TKO, and the ouster of Vince McMahon as CEO all provided new insights and the possibility of coming forward without incurring the retribution and intimidation of the McMahons. This information, along with recent charges in recent changes, in sex abuse laws, has allowed them to pursue justice in this suit. Quote, the WWE and the McMahons had responsibility to these underage boys, and they failed them in the worst way. We will vigorously fight to uncover the truth about this systematic, insidious, and life-altering abuse, unquote, said Mark DiCello, founding partner at DiCello and Levitt. Quote, we commend our clients for their bravery in coming forward and promise to relentlessly seek justice for them, unquote. Quote, these survivors are profiles in courage. One-third of child sex abuse victims never come forward because of the shame, humiliation, trauma, and physical and psychological injuries silence them, said Professor Marky Hamilton, founder and CEO of Child USA, a leading nonprofit think tank fighting to preserve and strengthen children's rights. Quote, sadly, we know 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 13 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18. Child USA is fighting child sex abuse and trafficking, and one of the greatest tools in our arsenal is to push for the statute of limitations reform so perpetrators and their enabling institutions can be held accountable in cases of delayed disclosure. Due to the Maryland window we fought for, these brave survivors can seek justice. Now, that is the end of the real meat of that press release. There was a little bit more to that as well as the link to Brendan Thurston's full breakdown of this are linked in the description, and those offer more insight into this as well. But now that we've broken that down, I think, it's time to talk about what this means, what the impact is, and why this is happening. A lot of people, I believe, are going to have, very similar questions. Number one, why these specific plaintiffs? Obviously, in the case of Vince McMahon and Linda, it is because at the time of these allegations, they were the ones who were in charge of WWF, the company known then as WWF. In the case of TKO, it is because when they purchased or merged with WWE, they essentially took hold and took responsibility for all of their liabilities and everything that came before. And that's kind of one of the things that happens when you own a company or when you take over a company like TKO did. You take the history, you take the assets, but you also take the baggage that is associated with it. And that is why they are in this lawsuit. And the reality is the Ringboy Scandal is something that we have known about for as long as it's been around. Phil Mushnick, who, did report heavily on WWE, a lot of it out of his own personal reasons to do so. He did always report very heavily against WWE, and one of the things that he reported on at the time in the 90s was the Ringboy Scandal. And, as was outlined in that video, you had these figures, all 3 of them who were outlined, Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, as well as Mel Phillips, who were at one point let go of the company by McMahon, who knew about these things that were happening, and then all were at different points brought back in. And in the case of Phillips, this is like a story that's kind of been around, and Mushnick even wrote about it. like, he was basically told, stay away from the ring boys. Don't you go near those ring boys, which, if you hear in any context, is insane. Because what you are basically saying is, yeah, I know you made some mistakes by inappropriately abusing those boys, but don't you do it again. Essentially getting a slap on the wrist. And that's obviously the crux of this. It is that not only were WWE and at the time, of course, WWF, not only were them as well as the people in charge in the company and the institution of WWE, hiding this, but they essentially allowed it to continue. And as stated in the video, we know that the FBI has said that there were at least 10 victims of Mel Phillips, who has since passed away. One of them, the alleged victims, was Tom Cole, who you saw that video of him giving an interview, and that was like an interview he gave in the 90s. He was a ring boy from the 90s who discussed, like, for the first time and really shed light about this in the mainstream media. And it was something that was picked up and was really negative press for WWE, but it was never really talked about as much as some of the other controversies for whatever reason. He obviously has since taken his own life, unfortunately, and you can point that probably back to the abuse that he suffered at the hands of Mel Phillips and the abuse that was essentially happening under the WWE umbrella. And again, it is one thing if you don't know something is happening. But when you are an institution like the WWE and you are as powerful and as knowledgeable as Vince McMahon, we know he knows everything that's going on in WWE. And if not everything, he knows what's going on within his inner circle. But even then, after hearing about that, let's even assume it was for the first time, he allowed these abusers, most notably Mel Phillips, to come back into the fold. That is not the actions of a responsible man. That's not the actions of a responsible institution. That is the type of behavior that leads to institutional rot. And it's unfortunate for the victims because, as we saw, there were at least 5 in that. And, I will read the statement in the Janelle Grant's lawyer in just a second. And I do want to talk about why that's important because, as noted in the release, that was like a factor in this coming to light, not only because of the heightened, media attention that when that happens, other allegations tend to be taken more seriously, ones that may not have been or ones that may have been forgotten about. But at the same time, you also have this very real and very powerful feeling of empowerment for people who did not feel empowered to speak up before. Because let's be honest, this is not the most comfortable thing to talk about. Having to relive your abuse, having to relive these horrible moments in your life, they are not easy things to talk about. And what happens is when you see, this collective action, when you see, one person speak up, that's why it's always important, like, for that first person to speak up, because then it empowers others to do so as well. And I think that's kind of what the press release had alluded to. Let's also take a look at a statement from Janelle Grant's lawyer, Ann Callis, who commented on this. The allegations in the Ringboy lawsuit against WWE are deeply troubling. Vince McMahon made sexual abuse and human trafficking a hallmark of WWE's culture for decades. Survivors like Janelle Grant and the other former WWE employees deserve their day in court. All former WWE employees who experience sexual abuse and harassment should be allowed to tell the truth by having their non-disclosure agreements waived. Ms. Grant stands by all WWE survivors and believes that Mr. McMahon, WWE, and all involved parties must be held accountable. And this is something that Ann Callis has been very strong about in her messaging, demanding that WWE release everyone from their NDAs, especially those who experienced the abuse that has been highlighted in the Ringboy case as well as the Janelle Grant case. And the rationale is essentially, if WWE wants to move on, if they want to move forward, if they want to rid themselves of this nightmare perception that they are having, then what they should do is move forward and let it all out there. Because if they do that as a company, then they will not be as, crucified, for lack of a better term, than if they just continue to try to sweep it under the rug. Because nothing really can change if you sweep it under the rug. True change happens by acknowledging it. Of course, this is all very new. We will see what the updates are going to be in the lawsuit. I've covered the Janelle Grant case. I will obviously continue to cover this, as it is genuinely one of the bigger stories that has come out, not only for news, but like in wrestling history. Like the Ringboy scandal is like something that, many wrestling fans don't know about, and it's unfortunate that it took this long for people to notice, but the fact that I think many fans will notice now is going to definitely start a lot of conversations. So that being said, we will continue to follow this. Be sure to smash that thumbs up, guys, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, keep it real.